So let's get started with making our first ferment. And what we're going to do first is kombucha, because it is the easiest one to do. So in order to ferment anything, we have to try and create an environment for yeast and bacteria to be able to convert food, whether that's vegetables or whether that's sugar or tea and sugar, which is in kombucha, for those bacteria and yeast to convert that food into carbon dioxide and an acid, which is what we want to come out of the end. And also it's multiplied and there's lots of good friendly bacteria in that as well. So kombucha is just fermented tea, fermented black tea or green tea or white tea. But what we're going to do today is just fermented black tea, normal builder's tea. And in the shops, kombucha is very expensive, and I really wanted to show you how easy it is to make your own, and you really don't need to go and buy it from a very expensive health food shop. You could just make it at home and it's just as good for you, if not better. So the ingredients that you're going to need is just tea bags, normal black tea bags. I've got Assam ones here, but you can have literally any builder's tea. You then need white sugar. There's various debates about what type of sugar is best, but plain old white sugar is absolutely fine to use. And then you need that catalyst, you need that organism that's going to be a catalyst in your ferment. And for kombucha, this is our catalyst. So these are called scobies, symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. I had to look that up again. And these are living. This has been created by bacteria threading cellulose all the way over the top of the kombucha. So I know they look really weird, I know they look like kind of aliens, but after a while you get really used to them and actually they feel like your pet after a while. And so scobies and the SCOBY juice, which is called a mother, just like you get vinegar mothers, so the SCOBY and the juice that comes with it are activating ingredients to inject into our kombucha the yeast and the bacteria that we need for that ferment to happen. So now that you've met my scobies, you might be wondering, how do you get hold of a SCOBY? The best place to get them is from somebody else who is already making kombucha, because every time you brew a batch of kombucha, you make another new SCOBY. And so as you can see, I've got quite a few here. And so I don't need them all. So what I can do is just carefully rip one off like that, and I could give that to a friend, just in a Tupperware with a little bit of the juice from the bottom, and yeah, they'll keep in the fridge for a few days if you want to transport them or anything. That really is the best way of getting a SCOBY. If you know anybody who's already making kombucha, that really is a lovely way of doing it. It's kind of like the story of sourdough starters, of, oh, my grandmother carried this starter out of burning Paris or whatever, and now it's been passed down through generations. I got my first SCOBY from a really good friend of mine, and she got hers from another really good friend in Edinburgh, and so actually we've probably got like third or fourth or fifth generation SCOBYs here. You can also buy SCOBYs online on websites and stuff, and that's fine to do as well, but I think there's something really wholesome and lovely about being given a SCOBY by someone else, and then once you start making kombucha as well, you can then share your excess SCOBYs with anybody else, and it just kind of ripples out, and it's just this wonderful free food movement. So yeah, that's introduction to the SCOBY. So let's actually get started and let's get on with making kombucha. So to make kombucha, it's very easy. I want to make about 3 litres, because I don't want it going all the way up to the top in my jar. I'm just going to make about 3 litres. I'm going to use 2 to 3 tea bags. I've got Assam, which is pretty strong black tea, so if you've got weaker black tea, I'll put 3 in, but I'm just going to use 2. And then I'm going to do 6 cups of water overall, but I'm going to do half boiling water and half not boiling water. So I'm going to do 3, carefully. That's 3 cups of boiling water, and then I'm just going to leave those tea bags to brew, like you put them in a teapot or whatever. You can use a wooden spoon just to give them a stir once, but don't go crazy. You don't want to be too strong. And then I'm just going to put tea towel over the top, that's to stop any flies going in there, and I'm just going to leave that to brew for 5 minutes. So now that my tea bags have been brewing for about 5 minutes, I'm just going to take the tea bags out, and now we're going to add our sugar. And so the bacteria and the yeast that live on the SCOBY, they will feed off the caffeine that's in the black tea, but also the white sugar, mainly the white sugar. So for 3 litres, which I want to get, I'm going to put in 6 tablespoons of sugar. That may feel like quite a lot of sugar, but it's all going to get converted into yummy fermented kombucha, so you're not going to end up with a really, really sweet drink at the end of it. Really important, try not to use the metal spoon to stir the kombucha at all. Just try and use wooden or plastic implements. Metal and kombucha don't go together at all, so just stir the sugar until it's all dissolved. And then after the sugar has dissolved, we're just going to add 3 cups of cold water that comes out of the tap. Some people say that you have to use distilled water. I've never bothered. There we go. So what we have in there is our black tea bags that have brewed in the boiling water. We've then taken the tea bags out, and we've added our white sugar, stirred it until it's dissolved, and then added 3 cups of cold water. And the reason why we do the cold water in as well is to cool this liquid down. If we put boiling hot tea into this jar, one, it's probably going to crack the jar and it's probably going to break it, but also it's going to kill our SCOBY. It's just like normal yeast, you know, if you bring it up to a high temperature, it's going to kill all of that bacteria and that yeast, and we don't want that. We want it to be alive and healthy. So now all we have to do is put them all together in our fermenting jar. Now I've already got quite a lot of SCOBY mother liquid in the bottom of my jar, but if you're doing this from scratch you won't have anything in there, and so you just put your tea mixture in and then add the SCOBY and the mother. Mine's already in there because I didn't want to take it out. So without it getting too messy, you can use a funnel, I'm sure, but I'm just saving on the washing up. There we go. So that is our mixture now in our fermenting jar, and all that's left to do is to add our SCOBY. If you already had SCOBYs and kombucha in here, you can just pour that new liquid over the top. That's absolutely fine. But if you've got a new SCOBY, then just take your SCOBY like this. You can even do it with maybe half of this size. You don't need a huge amount, not for about 3 litres. And then you just pop your SCOBY back in there, and you might pour some of your SCOBY liquid in there if you didn't already have some in the bottom. And then you just cover it with a tea towel, fold it over a couple of times so no flies can get in, but you don't, absolutely don't, close the lid, because we want it to be open. We want there to be carbon dioxide coming out. Okay, so that is our kombucha all set up for fermenting. So if you're wondering how actually this process works, it's really interesting because kombucha is a symbiotic system between yeast and bacteria. It's really quite incredible. So first of all, the yeast in the SCOBY, that lives in the SCOBY, starts breaking down that sugar that's in the tea and sugar juice. And it breaks it down into sucrose and fructose, and in that process gives off carbon dioxide. Then the bacteria that lives on that SCOBY starts breaking down that fructose which has been created, and in the process of that starts weaving a web of cellulose on the top layer of the liquid, and that forms a new SCOBY, which is incredible to see. It happens every time, and you'll get a new SCOBY forming on the very top of your liquid. Now, when that SCOBY has finished growing and it's reached the whole diameter of this jar, it then seals the top layer of that liquid, and so no oxygen can now get into the liquid, and that creates the fermenting environment. It's that cutting off of oxygen that is so important. So therefore, carbon dioxide can still come out through bubbles, but it is sealed. So that means that the bacteria that's inside the liquid starts synthesizing the food that's in there, that is this sucrose and fructose, and creates acetic acid. So it creates an acidic environment, which is what also prevents nasty things like mold, pathogens, anything like that breeding inside here. And that's why you only get the good bacteria growing inside your ferment. So keep your kombucha somewhere preferably dark and room temperature. If you keep it somewhere quite cold, it'll take a long time to ferment. It will ferment, but it'll take quite a long time. I'm going to just leave mine in a back shelf of my kitchen. It should be ready in about 5 to 7 days. If the weather heats up quite a lot, it'll be faster than that. So I'll come back and show you what to do after my kombucha has been fermenting for 7 days. So just some troubleshooting tips. If you notice on your SCOBY at the top of your kombucha, if you notice that it's going kind of brown or a little bit white or something, that's fine. That's just the yeast that's growing as well at the same time. Also, if you notice that you've got kind of stringy bits at the bottom, you can see mine at the very bottom there, kind of powdery stringy bits in your mixture, that's absolutely fine. That is just yeast. Don't worry about that at all. That's all really good stuff. But if you start noticing on your SCOBY that you've noticed like black or blue mold, that is not good at all, and I'm afraid you have to throw the whole thing out. If you get black or blue mold, that's potentially quite dangerous for your health. So just some heads up there as to what is potentially dangerous or what is absolutely fine. So after you've been brewing kombucha for a while, you'll probably find that you end up with an excess of SCOBYs. You end up with a lot of them. And if you're not giving them away to friends, you might wonder, what can I do with them? It feels like a waste just to throw them away. And also, it sounds weird, but you do end up feeling kind of emotionally attached to them. They are your pets in a way. And so what you can do, you can obviously compost them. They're really, really good for your compost bin, getting all of that amazing bacteria into your compost bin as well. You can also whiz them up and put them in your hair. I've heard people saying that, like using it to like massively condition your hair. But a word of advice that I got from a friend who was doing that is make sure that you don't wash any SCOBY down the drain, because it'll live in it. It'll live in the drain and it'll grow, and then you'll end up having to pour boiling water down your draining, try and kill it. It's really not a good idea to try and put them down the drain. Something that I've just started doing with them is dehydrating them. And so when you put them in a dehydrator in strips, they come out like this. And you can either eat them, they're very, very chewy. I'm actually going to use them as dog treats for my dog. They're really, really good for your pets as well to eat. They are full of those good bacteria. They're just dried. So I'm really interested to see how my dog takes to them. But there's just some ideas as what you can do with your SCOBYs. But ideally, you'll be giving them away to other people. Let's start a kombucha revolution all across the Northern Highlands. That would be wonderful. So just some ideas there for you. So one of the questions I get asked a lot about kombucha is just how alcoholic is it? It is a very mildly alcoholic drink once it's made. So it can come out as high as 2% alcoholic, but that is the absolute maximum. And actually generally it's about the same as drinking fruit juice that also has a small amount of alcohol in it. Kombucha is absolutely fine for kids to drink, and I've had questions before about people who are recovering alcoholics, whether they should drink kombucha or not. And just my own personal opinion is that it's very weak, but it would be completely up to you. If you don't want to have any alcohol in your system at all, then don't have kombucha. And just to put it in context, if you're worried about driving or whatever after you've had some kombucha, you would need to drink 8 big glasses of kombucha to equal 1 small bottle of beer. So even though it is alcoholic, it's very mildly alcoholic. And actually a little fun fact for you is that trace amount of alcohol is actually beneficial to our health, because it's that alcohol that extracts the nutrients from the food that we're fermenting or from the tea. You get your B vitamins from your black tea. So it's the alcohol that extracts the goodness out of it. So yes, actually it's funny, a tiny bit of alcohol actually makes fermented food even better for us. With kombucha, I would always suggest starting off small when you're drinking it. If you've never had it before and it's a new thing that you're trying, just start off with maybe 100 millilitres, just something really small, just so that your body can get used to it, and just so that your gut doesn't have a shock. Whenever you start eating any new food, your body kind of goes, what is that? And so don't go crazy, don't end up having like 8-9 glasses of it. That won't be very good for you. So just start off small amounts, and often it's good. So after a few days, you'll start to see a new SCOBY forming on the very top. So you can see it's sealed off the top of the kombucha, so there's no oxygen getting in. So that's creating that anaerobic environment that we want. Yeah, that shows that it's all working. And the older SCOBYs are all underneath. That's fine. You're looking out for that new SCOBY at the top, which should be nice and whitey, pale brown. So after about 5 days, you're ready to start tasting your kombucha, and that's really the way to check to see if it's done or not. So you just take a very small amount, just like that, taste it. And if it tastes very sweet still, then it's not ready. It's still fermenting because that sugar is still in there, that's the sweetness that you're tasting. But if it's starting to taste a bit like apple juice, so it's got that acidity to it, that's when you want to be starting to decant it. You can leave it for even longer. Eventually it'll turn into kind of a vinegar. It just depends on what taste you want to have. I like it when it's just got that tartness of tasting a bit like apple juice, but it hasn't gone too far. So at that point, you want to decant your kombucha into another receptacle, and you're going to do a second fermentation if you want to. You can drink it completely straight out of that first ferment, but if you want to do something extra special, you can do this second ferment. So carefully you're going to decant the kombucha from your fermenting jar into a bottle which can take some pressure. So I use these swing top bottles that I just got from charity shop, but you can use old Coke bottles, lemonade bottles. They can all handle pressure because it's going to continue to ferment a little bit inside this bottle. So you want it to put it in something really strong that can stand that, or else it'll break and explode potentially under the pressure. So I always use a funnel to do this because I tried to do it directly into the bottle a few times and it just completely overflowed and went all over the floor. So I use a funnel carefully. So fill up your bottle. So there we go, that's my kombucha. Incredible colour, isn't it? So if you've heard about flavoured kombucha, so like raspberry flavoured or strawberry flavoured or any fruits basically, this is the time to add your fruits or your flavourings. You don't put the fruit in at that stage, you put it in at this stage. And so if you have any raspberries, blueberries or anything that you want to flavour this kombucha with, you just put them in raw into the top, and they'll just float in here, and eventually the flavourings will go through the kombucha as well. But I like my kombucha to have a little bit of fizz to it. It's really, really nice when it just has that slight kind of champagne-y kind of feel. So what I do to achieve that is at this stage I get a tiny bit of sugar, and the way that I measure it out is not that side of a teaspoon but this side of a teaspoon, because you've got to be able to get it in as well. I get a tiny bit of white sugar and drop that in. Maybe a little bit more, not much though at all. A little bit of sugar in, and then you put the lid on. Make sure that all that sugar's mixed round. So that sugar that we've just added to this bottle, that is now going to kickstart the fermenting a little bit more, because all the bacteria and the yeast inside here will then feed on that last bit of sugar and produce carbon dioxide, which is why this bottle needs to be able to keep pressure. And so put this bottle into your fridge or somewhere cold, because we want really to slow that fermentation down. If you left this out at room temperature, this will eventually just explode because it's fermenting too fast and too much. So you want to slow it down hugely now. So then you can just dip into this bottle in the fridge whenever you feel like it. And now looking back at our fermentation jar here, there's still a little bit more in there that I could take out, but you want to leave a small amount of kombucha at the bottom, enough for the scobies to be happy and live in. And they can just sit there waiting for your next brew that you want. So that amount of kombucha will probably take me a fortnight to get through. And so I'll time my next brew to be finished in about 2 weeks' time, so that you have a continuous amount of kombucha. But yeah, it's as simple as that. So, but there you go. That is simple kombucha. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.